Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's webinar is Photographing Botswana's Okavango Delta, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader and Pro Photographer Richard de Gouveia. Thank you so much for being here today, Rich. Over to you.
Thanks, Brooke. Thank you for the intro and welcome, folks. I'm very excited that we've got this little two-part mini series going on today and tomorrow. Tonight, we're going to be covering Botswana's Okavango Delta, and tomorrow, we'll be doing a little bit of photographing in the jungles and of Madagascar and having a look at that. But the Delta is one of those really special places that has so much uniqueness and biodiversity. It's a World Heritage Site and has been for many, many years. It just is one of these places that I like to refer to as the Garden of Eden. It just feels like a biblical setting when you're there. It's so beautiful and so different. And even this picture here that I have in the background with the waters, you can see how clear it is underneath. The water's crystal clear as it gets filtered down. So let's have a look at the delta. Let's talk a little bit about the delta. So the Okavango Delta is based up here in the northwestern part of Botswana. This is Namibia over here that actually extends and juts out over the top. This is called the Caprivi Strip. And this is Angola up at the top here. And this is a very important part of it. The location of it is quite unique because what used to happen is the waters would rain here over the Okavango Highlands. And in this area over January through March, normally November through March, there's heavy rains and the water would have come down here. And thousands of years ago, this water would have stretched all the way down and reached the Limpopo River before going in. But there was a lot of tectonic movement that happened, and it's part of the East Rift Valley that runs through Africa. So Africa's got this massive plate that's actually pulling apart. And long after we're gone out of this world, there will be an ocean that will split Africa, at least the western half and the eastern half, apart from one another. So these rains play a massive role. So this is Angola up at the top here. Again, Namibia down here in the bottom, and cuts in and goes out. And because this tectonic movement happened, it sheared off and pushed the water down into this area. And now the desert floods. And there's not a lot of elevation change from the top of the delta to the bottom. I reckon about 8 feet in difference. It's very flat, very desert. And because of these sands, it keeps moving out and starts to create these islands, which all of the animals happen to come on. So our rainy season, even in Botswana, is your January or November through March would be rainy season or green season. Now in winter, in June or July, it takes about 6 months for this water to flow all the way down and start to flood this. So as this area reaches the dry season, the floods push in and it creates this beautiful dynamic water system that is just monumental. And it creates really great opportunities to see wildlife in a different way. In the green season, everything's there. It's just a little spread out. And then in the winter, as these floods push in, everything's pushed onto these islands. And we move across these islands from one place to another, going on these amazing safaris. Now, Botswana is probably one of the most beautiful and accessible places to go on a safari. Most of our safaris happen, and because of the environmental considerations in the area, all of the camps have to be able to be broken down. So all of the camps are made from tents and wood in order to be able to do this. But don't let the idea of a tent scare you, because they're pretty damn, glamping is probably a better term than camping. And because of the space, there's numerous ways we get around. Traditional Jump in a safari vehicle, take photos of leopards, and drive around. It's a very wild area. Concessions, we use private concessions, and they're very big, which allows us to travel. And you never see more than 2 or 3 vehicles in a sighting if you're unlucky. Most of the time, you have things to yourself, which is an absolute bonus. We also do canoes and mokoros, dugout canoes and mokoros, which allow you to move silently through these beautiful wetland areas, being able to take in the sounds, see the little frogs that are sitting on the reeds, and really be part of that whole system. The other way we can get around is on boats, because now you've got these flooded areas and you can move along the channels and you can get to photograph and see beautiful elephants feeding or swimming across these waterways. And then the last way we get around is sometimes by helicopter. And we'll even talk about some of the aerial photography that can be done in these areas. Now, this was on one of our, when we were doing the pro photo trips, we were doing a trip through Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. And we built in a couple of helicopter trips. And here we got to the thing and to the helicopter, and the pilot was taking the doors off, because they take the doors off while you're flying. And it was amazing until the lion walked out in front, and he had to sort of scramble into one of our vehicles because that wasn't going to work very well. So let's give you a quick intro.
There's an authentic experience when you are actually in a canvas tent and you go to sleep at night and can hear the sounds of the bush around you. You can hear a jackal calling in the distance or hippos coming out of the water. You sit around a fire under the stars at night and get to just be in this place. You really get a sense of place. And you get to just feel like you're just in this timeless moment in nature. You get a chance to lose your sense of self and lose your sense of time and really just be in that moment. We go deeper into the bush to get a more remote, more exclusive experience for our guests. So we go to private reserves where you're not surrounded by lots of other tourists. You can feel the vastness of the space around you. You just see nothing but wilderness. The access to wildlife and the exclusivity of the experience is unmatched. You're peacefully enjoying having no one else around in this environment that's very obviously exclusive just for you and your group. Our secluded small camps only have 4 or 5 guest tents. The footprint is smaller, the impact on the environment around you is smaller. It is such a core part of who we are at NatHab, to be out in nature in small groups. It changes everything about the experience. It makes it really touch people's hearts. It's a completely different way to be on safari, and there's something really beautiful about that. You have a more intimate experience with the wildlife. There's a sense of kind of mutual trust. It is much more than you expect it to be.
So let's talk about photographing this magical place. Here you can see the floods. You can see how these pathways are forged by animals moving between these islands. These are small islands. There are bigger islands and bigger places for us to move around. So what are we going to need to photograph in these beautiful places? Now, everyone's in the space of, okay, what time of year do we want to go? Obviously, winter's great because you have the floods that come in. But the green season safaris are also beautiful. You have these amazing rainstorms that come in. And while rain can be a problem for cameras, we can get rain gear and put stuff over them, no problems. The vehicles do have roofs, so it allows us to cover up that equipment and look after them. There's an array of different lenses and cameras. Obviously, our cell phones work beautifully for these things. The more time passes, the better our cell phones get at creating wonderful images. But they're never really going to catch up to the SLR and the quality of the more bigger digital cameras, because the sensors are bigger. I think in time we're going to catch up there. I know that the managing director of Sony said that by the end of this year, the cell phone camera would be the same quality as the SLR, but it wouldn't be the same as a mirrorless. We have crop sensor cameras, which allow us to get a bit more extra zoom at a cheaper price. So every single one of our photos has about a 1.5 times crop to it. I love the bridge cameras, especially for people starting out, or even those that are getting to a point where cameras are getting heavy. And you want to be able to hold these things still, and having a camera body that encapsulates everything. This specific RX10 Mark IV, unfortunately, they're not bringing out a Mark V, which really sucks from my point of view because I love this camera. Is it a 24 to 600 mil f4? So you have f2 at the bottom and f4 at the top. It's an incredible, incredible camera. Small, light, versatile. But my personal poison are the big mirrorless. I want something that's going to give me the image quality, and that's just because that's what my job is. I need to create images, and I want the best form of that I can get out of it. And the use of technology and the ability for mirrorless to be there and take part in everything is so, so important. My choice, I normally bring 3 lenses with me on safari. I have a fixed 400 2.8. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea because it's really big and there's a big price tag, which is quite scary on its own. That's a fixed 400 mil. And then I have a second body, which I put the 70 to 200 on. This gives me a little bit of variability, gives me the ability to pick one camera up or the other. If something's further away, I'll use the 400 mil. If something's closer, I'll grab the 70 to 200 and I can play with this. And we'll talk about how these things go. And then I also have an ultra wide, a 16 to 35 mil. And this is very important for landscapes, for night skies, for that part of it. So you have to bring that in. More budget friendly, very experienced people will have the 100 400 or a 200 600 or 100 500. These are great lenses. They're variable lenses. They're lighter weight. They're easy to put in your bag, and you don't need as many lenses as what I'm carrying around. So like having 100 400, you could have just one lens and a wide angle, and you'd be good to go the whole way through. So choosing the right lens is a very important thing. And I'm not always a fan of going, let's go buy a lens, especially if you're going to do safari once or twice in a year, maybe once every 2 years. To go and spend $5,000, $6,000, $2,000 on a new lens seems like a crazy outlay. You can also go and rent them. A lot of places that are renting lenses where you can get really high quality things for this trip that you're spending a big ton of money on creating amazing images. So why not spend it and rent a good quality lens to come with you? And one of us, as the expedition leaders, will be there to help you, to put you in the right places. We've got bean bags on the vehicles. We put you in the right spaces to take the best images possible. A strap is always a great option just to make sure that you can carry your stuff easily. And the one thing that I find people overlook is the importance of a good quality camera bag, something that carries everything, something that's got a bit of waterproof ability, something that's easy to move through airports. I'm a bit of a groupie for Peak Design. I use a lot of their stuff. I have way too many of their bags. In fact, I have all 4 of these bags that are in the picture. But I love the 45-liter outdoor line backpack because it's very much a backpack that I can use anywhere if I wanted to go camping or do anything else. And what comes in it is you have an inner camera cube that fits inside. So I have a big one that fits inside, but you can have multiple. If you don't have that much gear, you can have smaller ones, so they come in small, medium, and large. And that way you can then pack your gear the way you need it, and it's very accessible for when you're out in the field. And this is very important for our small planes, that you know what your weight limit is. Most of our things, especially going to the Delta, is heavily weight restricted because of the fact that we are on small planes. We give you a little bit of weight allowance extra for the photo trips. So find out from your adventure specialist what that is, so that you know exactly what that situation is. And remember that there's laundry in every lodge. And for the most part, especially if you're traveling in the dry season, that laundry you'll send in the morning, you'll get it back in the afternoon. So really, you only need a few pairs and a couple of layers to keep you warm, and you just keep rotating. It's not a fashion show. We really want to get images of the things out there. Our settings are going to be important. And while I want to teach you about the photographing in the Delta, I don't want to go too deep into the actual settings. We've got lots of webinars. I've done basic webinars on each thing. But just to round it up and give you guys a quick run through, we want to very often freeze motion. This is a big part of what we want to do. We want to try and freeze action, because wildlife is not the easiest thing to photograph. Because I cannot say, hey, Mr. Lion, please sit. Oh no, face me this way, both ears. We need to be able to anticipate motion. We need to anticipate what's going to happen. And when things are happening fast, sometimes we have things chasing each other, because this is wildlife. And the best part about going to these places is we watch things interact with the environment, interact with other animals, and we try and create stories. It's all about story creation. And I'm less setting centric and more story centric. Settings play an important role. We want to be able to freeze action, and we want to separate our subject from background. So very often we want a low aperture. Most lenses will be around the 5.6 range, especially like 100 400 or a 200 600 will be 5.6 6.3. Faster lenses, that's why I have the big heavy expensive lens, because that goes to 2.8, which allows for a very shallow depth of field, and it allows me to separate my subject from the background and brings the viewer to the story, to the subject of the story. I want them to see that and go directly to that point. When we're shooting landscapes, we may want to drop that, or make the aperture smaller and bring that number, the f-stop, up, so that we have more depth of field, so we can see things from front to back. There is a big thing about noise. And for years, I've been fighting with this back and forth about what's noise, what isn't noise, how high can you shoot. I've had people who went and paid money on photographic courses, and their teachers told them they couldn't shoot higher than ISO 200, and if they were really pushing it, it was ISO 400. The person who was teaching that course was clearly still stuck in film days. Nowadays, we can shoot much higher, but what happens when we go higher is with ISO, effectively, if you think about us turning up the volume on a radio, on a hi-fi, if you turn it up too loud, it becomes distorted. The sound starts to get crackly, and you don't hear it as clearly. So ISO is the visual turning up of light. And if you turn it up too high, you get this noise. So it looks like grain here, where you can see in the 400, it's very clear grain. But nowadays, we really don't even have to worry about that. And the reason why we don't have to worry about that is because we have so many great tools. If you're willing to do a bit of post-production, Lightroom's new noise reduction on RAW is amazing. And I still use other programs which allow me to be able to build up and create and denoise things using other secondary programs. So let's talk about animals. What you can expect on a photographic journey even non-photographic journey through the Okavango Delta is amazing, amazing, amazing wildlife. There are so many different things that you get to see. The big five are obviously there, but there's other animals, and the animals in landscapes. And because of the water and the situation, you have wonderful things. So here we go back to that freezing of action. I want a fast enough shutter speed that by daytime we're probably sitting at about 2,000th of a second, trying to freeze action. And now it's hot. This elephant's just had a swim and a mud bath and cooled itself down, and now it's dust bathing, trying to get rid of some of those ectoparasites that are sitting on their bodies that they don't want there anymore. So by throwing the dust and by making sure we have a fast enough shutter speed, we can freeze all the action. You can see all the dust spots and be able to pull that through. The other thing we're looking for is animals interacting with the water, because there's not a lot of places in the world that you will see big game like lions or leopards interacting with water. Cats hate water. But because of the delta and because of the islands, these guys are forced to change their habit. And us as guides, as your expedition leaders, we try to put you in a position. So to give you a little background on this story, this was an amazing, amazing sighting. We'd spent the morning with this lion. We left the lodge and we heard this and this lion was roaring loud. We went out and we obviously had an audio trail to follow to find him, and we found him before the sun rose, and then the sun was rising, and the compression that he put into the roar creates this mist that comes out. It wasn't even that cold. We were in September, was probably around 70 degrees out, but because of the compression that goes through and the power that goes through with that roar, this smoke or the steam comes out of his mouth, and we wanted to capture that. So you're parking in a position. Our long lenses give us the ability to get on a lower plane with actually not having to climb out of the vehicle and be on the floor, because that can be a little bit detrimental to your lifespan if you're on the floor with a lion. And we sat there and we followed him and we were roaring and watching, and as we were going along to enjoy the moment, we're not rushing through these things. The idea of being a photographer is not to go lion, check, next animal, move on. We're not taking 2 photos and moving off. We want to spend time with these things, and spending time gives us the ability to not only capture amazing images, but we get to see behavior. We get to interpret that for you guys on the vehicles and be part of that and be part of their lives for a while. And through years of habituation where guides have been kind, the local guides have been kind to these animals. They haven't pushed them or driven or tried to upset them or get too close. Over time, that comfort zone becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And this allows us to get into a position where they do their natural behavior without us interfering with that. And then we get this opportunity of taking photos. So here we were with this guy. He was roaring. We could hear another lion roaring on the island across a channel. And we were like, okay, cool. The likelihood is he's going to start moving that way. So he started moving up. And because we are working with local guides that are experts in those areas, they understand the movements. They understand where this lion could potentially cross. So I'm talking to the local guide. He's saying, I think he's going to cross. So the idea is to get into the right place. So there we were. We moved up. We crossed the channel because we wanted to cross and get all the water to settle and be in the position where he was walking towards us when we're photographing him. Because if we had followed him from behind, all we would have got is butt shots walking through the water. That's not going to tell the story of this lion walking through the water. So we have to make calculated decisions or risks. In this case, we decided to leave him to go to the point that he would probably cross. And we got lucky, more than lucky, because there was some skill involved in understanding from the local guide. And we could get all our settings right, take photos of the water, make sure that our shutter speeds are good, that we got everything right, that the reflections are going to be ready, make sure we got fast shutter speed so that we can freeze the drops that are falling off of him as he's walking through the water. So as an expedition leader and you as a wildlife photographer, the more you understand about the animal and the more you leverage the local knowledge, the better your positioning will be to be able to take these photos. Here we sat with a cheetah, and she was sitting on a termite mound. We knew that she was going to take a bit of time and wait for it to cool down, so we stopped, we had a little sundowner, have a quick drink, then went back to her, and as the sun started to set, she started to move. Now, getting a photograph of a cheetah on a termite mound is amazing, but getting a cheetah moving, or the intention, look at the intention in her head. She's got that real perch. So I'm trying to tell the stories through these images of what was happening. I've got lots of images of cheetahs lying down doing nothing. Here a leopard climbed into a tree. We'd been following this leopard for 2 hours. We actually watched her catch a small antelope on that day, moving from termite mound to termite mound, because she knew that the antelope in the area, the tsessebes, were leaving their babies in those areas. It was green season safari, and we watched, and she would use these vantage points. So whenever she was going to a point, we were looking for where's the next vantage point, where she's going to perch herself, and where can we position ourselves to have the light in the correct position and for us to take the best photos. Sometimes we have to be reactive, but most of the time we're trying to be proactive. And you have to allow that time for things to happen, and you can't do that by going in and ticking a box and leaving. When we're photographing, we're looking for moments that are going to really tell a story. And again, I keep going back to storytelling, but these 4 cubs were sitting in the delta. Their mom had left them, their mothers had left to go hunt, and these 4 were waiting for them to come back and hopefully give them a contact call and say, there's food, breakfast is served, let's go get it, which they'd be very excited for. So they're looking in the direction, and they weren't quite perched in that position when we got there. They were all around, and one was pointing the other way, and we got cool photos. But it was the moment that they all turned and looked, and you have all the eye contact, you have all the ear contact. Sounds weird, but if all the ears are not facing the same direction and one's pointed backwards, you lose the focus. And that focus is something that will really bring you in. I've left a little base of grass underneath, a little bit of space. They're on the top third. You've got 2/3 below, 1/3 above. So you're trying to find these compositions that really work. If I'd gone in too close here, this would have been a cool image, but you lose the mound from my perspective. I like a bit of space so that I can see where the mound is. I can see that they're on something, perched on top of something. The other thing that happens in the delta, which you don't get in a lot of places, is one, you have a lot of water life. So you've got hippos, you've got crocodiles, you've got a lot of bird life, and we'll go to bird life shortly. But at sunsets, you've got a lot of great colors and reflections that happen because of it. And when you're on a boat or on the shore looking in, you can get these beautiful colors and start working through things in that way. You also get animals swimming, like this elephant. This was in the Linyanti, which is in the Caprivi Strip. But this guy was swimming, and not just like, oh, I'm going from this side to this side. He was actually going down and fetching these water hyacinth roots and eating them in the water and playing. He was literally going under, and all you would see is the trunk popping up. And I've got photos of that for that story, but this was just an all-encompassing, beautiful image. And because we're in a boat, your angle is different. When we're in a vehicle, we're slightly higher up, but for this, the boat allows you to get right down low at eye level. and put yourself on the water, which changes perspective. The other things we have are these beautiful sunsets, and these are lechwe, so this is found, these guys are found in these wetland areas. They're highly adapted just to wetland areas, and they run faster in the water than out of the water, and they will use that water to their advantage. They've got splayed hooves, which allow for this bounding motion, and it's such a beautiful story. You've got this backlight, this silhouetted backlight behind them. You've got all of these guys watching us, this one standing at attention, so that's your main subject, and you've got space to show what the delta looks like, that there's water in amongst all these grasses. But then you want to tell a story. This is one of my favorite photos. So then we had these lechwe started to run. So I slowed the shutter speed down because at this point I didn't want to freeze action. I wanted to show motion. I wanted to emphasize the motion. I wanted to emphasize the water drops spraying off so you can see them all extended as the water drop is recorded over time. And you pan and you go click, 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 click. This was taken at 30th of a second, so really slow shutter speed, and you just take photos as fast and as many as you can, and you just keep going. Generally, it will be the photos in the middle that will have the smoothest motion because you'll catch the right speed and then follow them and keep going through. And then you're choosing the right frame. I love this because the second one was almost ghosted in the background, and this one was far more apparent. Here was another image that was taken that was a little bit of a mistake from my side. We'd left early in the morning. I picked up one camera and I still had it on settings from the night before, and the shutter speed was 1/5 of a second, and I clicked and I was like, okay, cool, I just got to go with it. I can't change this now because by the time I change it, the moment's gone. So I kept on clicking and it created this really artistic, different look. So sometimes we get lucky, but you've got to stay in the luck to be able to try and pull something out. So that might not be everyone's cup of tea, but we're really trying to nurture it. We're trying to nurture moments, create moments. This was the runt of a litter. The alpha dogs coming in to smell it and see if it was okay. It was calling. The other pups had been bossing it around and biting it and causing all sorts of problems. But what story are you trying to tell? Always try find the story in these big animals. They're beautiful. We want eyes in focus. We want shallow depth of field. We want to freeze action when, for the most part, and we want to blur it when we're trying to show movement or chaos. Cool. So that's animals. There's so much. I mean, we could talk about this for forever. The bird life for a birder or a bird photographer is just next level, guys. It is so freaking beautiful. I can't even explain it. Lilac-breasted roller. I don't just want birds perched. Sometimes birds perched are fantastic. They're really beautiful. This is a malachite kingfisher, only about yay big, tiny little bird, sits on the stalks. When we're on the boats, we're moving around, they allow us to get really close and get some great photos. But we're really trying to capture things like lilac-breasted rollers are all over the place. But it's really when they fly that you get the moment. So again, fast shutter speeds. If we can go have a fast shutter speed over 1,000th of a second and have at least f5.6 on your aperture, it gives us a little bit of depth so we can get from wingtip to wingtip in focus. Also, there's some movement that happens when birds are flying that the camera may not be moving fast enough, and we want that eye in focus. So you just got to keep watching and take lots of photos. Again, this is one of those time things. Little bee eaters. This is a little bee eater. The hours of my life that I can't say I've lost, but that I've put into photographing these things is so much fun because they fly from a branch, they fly out and then come back, and then fly out and then come back, and then fly out and come back. So you have these multitude of opportunities to go. If you're shooting with the new Canons or the Sony A9 III or the Olympus or the Nikons, some of the new Nikons, they have a pre-capture, pre-roll capture, which is when we're doing bird photography and flying, you want to have that on because it records the 2 seconds. You can set the length, but like 1 to 2 seconds before then. So sometimes our fingers don't react as fast as what they could. So what you're doing is you're holding your button halfway down on focus, and then as it takes off, you push, but it's recorded a second before that. So you have all the motion before that. And it's like cheating, but it's not, because we can do it. We have beautiful birds like gymnogenes. This was a cool one of the cormorants swimming alongside a boat. We were on our way back to camp, and it was swimming along, so I decided to slow the shutter speed in order to create this slow pan, create the accent of the movement. I have basically half water, a third and a third, effectively a quarter and a quarter of this lighter grass and the green grass. So there's these color palettes that move through yellow, green, white, blue, and then the cormorant as a subject on the third. Just worked beautifully. I love taking a little bit of a risk sometimes with the photos. Botswana also has some of the big birds. So we have secretary birds. These guys stand about 3 feet tall, really beautiful. They've got these long tassel feathers that you can see at the top there, beautiful colors, long tail feathers, and they walk through the grasses. So here, trying to get as low as possible, use the longest lens possible to try and frame them in amongst the grasses, show it in its space. It's looking for grasshoppers or snakes as it's moving through, and we're really just trying to show the grassland aspect of this beautiful area. I've said the malachite kingfishers, really beautiful, lots of different types of kingfishers too. This is a battalier eagle, male and female pair, sitting on a branch. Again, I'm trying to balance out the glint in the eye that you can see from the sunshine. Make sure both of them are sharp. So I was up at like f4 for this one to make sure that I had both of them in focus. And they're sitting perched against this beautiful blue sky. And you've got to balance the light out. If you're shooting against a strong backlight, we may need to blow the sky out in the background. So we go to plus on the exposure compensation, really blow the background out, but then our subject is correct. And that plus minus button, that exposure compensation is probably the strongest tool I would think on the camera, because everything's set up to be metered. Our camera is metered. Some very clever guy somewhere in Asia, somewhere in the US, somewhere programmed that camera to say, this is what the perfect exposure is. But it doesn't know that I'm shooting a subject that's pitch black or against a bright light. So it's always trying to measure the light and bring it down to 19% gray. By using the plus and the minus, we can take the creative control. So we would crank to plus and overexpose so that we make sure that our feathers are not blacked out. Or if it's too bright, that we go to minus and we take light away and make sure our subject is correctly balanced. Here's a little pearl spotted owlet that we found on one trip. They're also only about yay big, tiny little guys, beautiful, beautiful eyes. And being in this position to be able to photograph birds with this in these environments is truly spectacular. Another great bird, a hoopoe here, just with a bit of movement. We probably could have moved a little bit more to the right to try and clear, if I'm going to be judgmental on my own photo, that this line over here, this branch here, would have fallen away from this guy. That would be a thought pattern. Again, the little bee eaters on their branches. Shallow depth of field so that you blur the background and then they really pop out and do things. Now, while we have all these incredible animals to see, the landscapes and the sunsets in Botswana are amazing, especially in that winter time, because the dust kicks up and you have these beautiful trees. This was an apple leaf tree, these gnarled, sort of twisted branches, twisted trunk that create beautiful images. And again, our exposure compensation comes in here because we need to be able to underexpose to create that light. Sometimes the camera gets it just right, but white balance is an important thing here too, because all this orange, sometimes the camera sees the orange and goes, oh God, it's too orange. I need the whites to be white. So it'll make it more blue. So I like to shoot in daylight. It's a little sun, which doesn't add or take away any oranges or add any blues, to keep that white balance going. So I get exactly the same color that I'm hoping for. Just another example of a sunset. I often like to put the sun behind things because it's so blown out. It highlights that object beautifully. And sometimes when that dust is so thick, we actually get these beautiful orb sunsets where you have this orange orb going down, and I'm utilizing the reflection off the water to create a double, more interesting photograph that I can then put the sun in both locations. But also when the moon starts to rise, and here was a Cheshire cat grin moon coming up over the darkened sky, hand holding it, trying to capture that deep burnt orange that comes with that sunset, and then the moon as a very different object within the photograph. But when we're doing it, we're also trying to add the animals to the context of the landscape. Here was a sunrise, the mist, there was still mist going along, and this was a sunset, sorry, it wasn't mist, it was dust from these guys kicking up and eating roots and tubers, and it kicked up so much dust that all of it was sitting around them. So I wanted a nice low angle, wider lens, get the color of the sunset in the background and the silhouettes of these elephants in the photo. So putting animals in situ creates the story. So here we have two male lions and the buffalo they were following and hunting that morning. Moving along, they were moving along here, and I waited for this guy to look back so that we had some form of pullback and visual to look at. A kudu walking through a sunrise. There'd been a massive bushfire on this trip, and wintertime is time of burn. It's a grassland, it is a pyrophytic environment, and the smoke created this really blue haze, this blue morning light, and the sunrise was orange, and it created this contrast of cold and warm, these cool colors and warm colors. We're always trying to get odd numbers in photos. So here we have 3 trees and 1 kudu. And then I'm trying to do a third ground, 2/3 sky, and measure everything so that you create this beautiful composition that everyone's moving around. And then sometimes we underexpose and we capture the grandeur, the light flicking off of, or twinkling off of the water, the elephants and giraffes silhouetted against a beautiful sky. The silhouettes are really beautiful, beautiful photos. Oh. But sometimes we don't even need animals, just the grasses, the beauty of it, the tranquility of where you are, these beautiful big reed grasses that grow in the delta, and the colors of the sky. But we always need a subject, because you can always take a photo of a sky with nothing else in it, but without a subject, you cannot convey an experience. The experience would just be yours to see. And from sunset and a palm tree silhouetted against it to a lit up sky with the Milky Way behind it and the lit up subject where we were painting with light. The starscapes of being in the Okavango Delta in the middle of nowhere with this very, very, very little light pollution and big, big skies because everything's flat, allows us to capture and experience stars and capture moments that will stick with you and tell stories for days. And then lastly, sometimes we want to capture the Earth's movement. And with the water in front, it allows us to also capture reflections of the stars moving. So this star trail was taken over 25 minutes outside in front of my tent While we were having dinner, we quickly popped in. I set up the camera, let it do its thing. When I got back, switched it off. Wonderful ways to capture moments and to capture things. And then lastly, something that the Okavango Delta and the camps that we visit offer us is the ability to see it from the air. And some of our trips already have built in these helicopter trips from the sky. And your ideal lens for that is not a long lens. It's sort of 70 to 200 position. If you don't have that, 100, 400 works perfectly, or 24 to 70. But I like the 70 to 200 because it gives us a little bit of zoom. And then they take the doors off, and then the magic happens because you see the world from a completely unique perspective. And by going later in the afternoon or early in the morning, you have these long shadows that are created on the animals, and you get to see them moving through these waterways, eating, feeding with very little disruption. Here you see those long shadows as rutting impalas are chasing each other around, trying to fight for herds, and their shadows are telling as much of a story as the animal themselves. We have beautiful trees lined with this incredible water and these pathways that create wonderful leading lines in towards your subjects. And sometimes you get a grumpy elephant bull that may stare up at you, and you put him in the grassland and make a story. I would love to see these photos. I need to have them printed and blown up really big. Here we have hippos swimming through the channels. And these guys, this is a story unto its own, because without hippos, the delta dies, because hippos are the ones that open up the channels in the grasses, allowing water to flow through the entire delta. And even here, we got this one blowing out. So taking lots of images from the top there, capturing the motion as they moved through here, telling the story of them carving and how they breathe in these areas. And even these beautiful baobab trees with wildebeest around just shows how big this ancient tree is, probably 2,000 years old, with these wildebeest looking dwarfed by the tree and the shadow that's cast by it. Another one of an elephant in the water, really pretty. Impala running through the water. So you get the idea of how beautifully all of this can work. And then you have these gigantic predators, the crocodiles that roam these waterways that can get up to 15, 16, sometimes 20 feet long in these waterways moving along. Here was a grumpy hippo. He wasn't so happy with us, so he was showing us his teeth. We quickly moved off and stopped disturbing him, but they can be grumpy at the best of times. And then last, some days you get really lucky, and we found this big herd of buffalo moving along, and lions hunting them, following the herd along with them. This lioness keeping an eye on them from a termite mound. This male lion taking a brief moment to stare up at us in the sky as we flew past, allowing for some really spectacular, different perspectives. So I hope that has been enjoyable. Brooke, I'm ready for any questions that you may have.
Rich, that was wonderful. Oh my gosh. As we were talking before we started, I miss Botswana so much, and you just made that itch even stronger. I would love to go back, and I'm so excited for anybody who has a trip booked to this beautiful, incredible destination. So, with that, everybody, we have about 8-ish minutes of time with Rich to do some Q&A here. So, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in there, and we will see how many we can get through. First, we're getting lots of thank you, Rich. Love your presentations. They're the best. Lots
Thank
of
you.
those going through. Could not agree more, everybody. Okay. Here we go. So when somebody's in the Mokoro itself, what lens do you recommend people have armed and ready to go? A longer one, a shorter one? What do you think when people are packing to get into the Mokoro?
So two things. I think a GoPro works really well. So this photo in the background here was actually taken with a GoPro. So it's a great camera to have with you because it's waterproof. You can put it underneath the water. You're also not too worried if it falls in the water. You just don't want to lose it, but yes. I like a wider lens, but something 70 to 200 works fine. You're not often looking for the big things there. You're looking for birds. So you're going to have a long lens with like 600 or 400 mils in order to be able to focus in on that bird life that you're now at water height. They're not scared because you have no engine running. You're just being pulled and taking in the sights and sound. So I would probably stick with a long lens, a GoPro, and maybe my cell phone just to capture some of the landscape so that you're not covered in cameras the whole way through your Mokoro journey.
Thanks for that. That's fantastic. Great. So if somebody, so they have lots of lenses here, they have a list here. If they have a 100, a 500, a 15 to 35, and a 24 to 105, do you think that they should leave the 24 to 105 at home to save space? What do you think?
Yes, you would get away with that. I think the wider lens allows us, your 1535 would allow for plenty space to be able to do it. And with our high megapixel cameras now, we're able to crop in a little bit on those images if you want something wider. 100 to 500 gives you a great length to get animals in space as well as get close enough to birds or eye shots or portrait shots of animals.
Perfect. Great. Thanks for that. Awesome. We have lots of ones coming in. Okay, next. Do you know of any good resources for people to rent a lens? And are there any camps when people are in Botswana that they could borrow lenses, or should they bring them from home?
I would bring them from home. You would have to look at the retailers around you. There are a lot of retailers around the US that do rent lenses. You just look up lens rental for Canon, Sony, Nikon, whatever you're using, and it should point you to somewhere close enough to you. Then you pay a daily rate and there's things, and then you bring it with you. There are places in South Africa that do it, but your logistics of trying to get to South Africa, get that lens dropped off with you, then get to Botswana, then come back and give it back to a person is too much of a worry. It's much easier just ordering it at home, dropping it off when you get back home.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next, if somebody's really into landscape photography and prefers to use a tripod, how would you recommend somebody go about that? Should they bring their tripod from home? Should they not? Should they try to use beanbags in the vehicle? How would you tackle this question?
100% tripod is a possibility. I take my tripod with me every time. Again, like I said, I'm a bit of a peak design groupie, so I have the carbon fiber one, which is really light. But if you can get a nice lightweight one, travel tripod, any place that you find a cool landscape, we have the ability to stop the cars. Because we're in private reserves, we get to go off road and put ourselves in places. And sometimes off the road means driving through the water. So you get to cool spaces that you can photograph. When you're in the vehicle, you can use bean bags, but if you are that into landscapes that you need the tripod, that you have neutral density filters, you want slow shutter speeds, low ISO, etc., we can stop. You can put your tripod out, you can take the photo, and we can move on. Completely possible. And then it also opens up the idea of star photography because you need a tripod for the astro.
Great. Yeah, and continuing on this potential shaky photo, not dilemma, but whatever you want to say it is, the amazing bush flights that you have from the air. And if somebody wants to take really good photos while they're on a bush flight from one spot to the other, how can somebody go about that to reduce the shakiness or the noise in their photos as they're flying above the delta?
That's a great question. Generally, again, it just goes to shutter speed. The helicopters are surprisingly steady. You're not bouncing up and down. They're pretty steady in flight. Some days you get cool pilots that fly like they're a limo driver, so they go slowly and they turn and they show you things. And sometimes we get the testosterone-filled pilots that want to show you how fast their helicopter goes and how they can do handbrake turns in the sky, which is not ideal for photography, at which point you tell them to slow down. But just a fast shutter speed is more than sufficient to be able to go. So a thousandth of a second or faster, and you'll be A for away and golden.
Great. And if somebody hasn't been to the Delta before and they want to learn more about the seasonality, could you talk a little bit more about that? What is like the winter season? What is the rainy season or like the green season? All of these terms that you were using and that we use when we're talking about Botswana safaris. Could you break that down a little further? What does this actually mean?
Cool. So in the southern hemisphere, the winter period is your summer holidays. So generally from June, July, August, September is the dry season. So there's no rain, but that is when the flood pushes in. So it's this messed up thought. It's dry, but it's rarely flooded. And then your green season is your rainy season. So that's sort of November, December, January, February, March. Beautiful times to go. I love going when it's flooding, but I also like the shoulder season. So my favorite time is sort of September, October, when it's starting to warm up again. It's right at the end of the dry season, so the animals are really pushed hard. But I also like that April, May period because the animals are just getting ready to go into rut, and the impala are rutting, and it's still green and beautiful, but there's less chance of rain. But that green season allows for a lot more, your rainy season allows for a lot more storms, for a lot of deep, beautiful cumulonimbus clouds. So the landscape really pops, green colors and everything because everything's green and beautiful and lush. Where your dry season, everything's a bit more brown and yellow from the dried out things. You can see further with the trees losing their stuff, and then you've got the water season, that the flooding that happens at that time. So it really depends on your tolerance of heat, because sort of December, January can be hot, like 105, 108 degrees in the summertime, and then in the winter it drops really cold, can get close to freezing, sort of 35, 40 degrees in the mornings. Puffer jackets, beanies, gloves, you name it, you need to be prepared for the cold.
Yes, I made that mistake as a rookie going to Namibia in June. It was way colder than I expected.
Exactly.
Especially coming from the US. Yeah. Do not underestimate the cold it can be when you're there in the winter season or the cold season. With that, that was the last question I will ask you today, Rich. So I would love to send it to you for any last closing comments.
Just want to say thank you for tuning in and taking the time to listen to this chat, and go and chat to your adventure specialist, because Botswana, if you've been, you'll know that you want to go again. And if you haven't, you need to go. It's worth every moment that you spend out there.
Oh, I could not agree more. Again, I can't wait to go back myself. It's such a beautiful area. And everybody, if you did not hear in the introduction, Rich is doing a part two tomorrow on Madagascar. So please join us tomorrow for more fun with Rich and photographing amazing African wildlife. But again, Rich, thank you. This was fantastic. I enjoyed every minute. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in. Again, join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. If you're a part of a photo club and would like a NatHab photo guide to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, please email us at webinars@nathab.com. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.